OpenAI bought Astral this week. If you don't know Astral, you know their tools, Ruff and UV, two Python developer tools that the community adopted not because anyone marketed them, but because they are genuinely excellent. Ruff replaced an entire category of Python linters. UV replaced pip in enough real environments that just use UV became the default answer in engineering Slack threads. The headline will get filed under AI company buys developer tool startup. That framing misses the point entirely. OpenAI is not buying a Python linter. OpenAI is buying the trust that lives inside every Python developer's virtual environment. That trust took years to build. Charlie Marsh and the Astral team earned it by shipping tools that were faster, more opinionated, and less annoying than the incumbents. OpenAI wrote a check for that installed base, that credibility, and the engineers behind it. But the Astral deal is one piece of a pattern that became impossible to ignore this week. The same 72 hours brought us reports that OpenAI is planning a desktop superapp, ChatGPT, Codex, and the Atlas browser unified into a single product. Greg Brockman is involved. Reuters reported separately that OpenAI is building a GitHub alternative. And the Windsurf acquisition stalled because Microsoft wanted access to Windsurf's IP to protect GitHub Copilot. Read those stories individually and they're interesting. Read them together and you see the architecture of a developer platform. I've seen this before, twice. In 1995, Microsoft made a decision that locked in a decade of developer loyalty. They would own the entire developer experience, not just the operating system. Visual Basic had been around since 1991. Visual C++ was shipping. Microsoft started bundling everything into Visual Studio. They bought Fox Software for Fox Pro. They acquired Vermeer Technologies for Front Page. The strategy was never about any individual tool. It was about making the cost of switching away from Windows feel prohibitive because every tool you depended on was stitched into the Microsoft fabric. By the time the DOJ antitrust case was in full swing, the developer lock-in was already complete. Developers didn't stay on Windows because they loved Windows. They stayed because their entire workflow was Windows. The OS was the platform. The platform was the tools. The tools were the moat. The second parallel is IBM acquiring Rational Software in 2003 for $2.1 billion. IBM didn't need another software product. IBM wanted the workflows. ROSE, ClearCase, Requisite Pro. If your team ran on Rational tools, you ran on IBM tools, and IBM's consulting arm was right there to sell you more. The tools created the relationship. The relationship created the revenue. Both stories have the same structure. The platform company identifies where developers spend their time. It acquires the trust that already lives there. It connects that trust to a broader surface. Then it waits. OpenAI is running that same playbook. But three things are different this time, and they matter. First, the speed. Microsoft's developer platform consolidation took roughly a decade to reach critical mass. OpenAI's version is happening in months. Astral's tools have been widely adopted for less than 3 years. Claude Code went from zero to being the benchmark that Codex chases in about 18 months. The cycle that used to take a decade now takes a product cycle or two. Second, the moat target. In the 1990s, Microsoft was locking in the workflow around writing code. OpenAI is locking in the workflow around writing code with AI. That's a larger surface area. It includes the model, the IDE, the linter, the dependency manager, the code reviewer, the browser, and soon, the code repository. If they succeed, switching away from OpenAI won't mean install a different IDE. It will mean rebuild your entire cognitive workflow. Third, the incumbent threat is sharper. When Microsoft built its developer platform, the competition was fragmented. Borland, Whatcom, MetroWorks. Nobody had a coherent counter strategy. In 2026, Anthropic is not fragmented. Anthropic launched a code review tool this month and committed $100 million to a Claude partner network. Anthropic is making the same bet on developer trust from a different angle. Meanwhile, Microsoft, which owns GitHub and has powered Copilot with OpenAI models since 2021, is watching its own partner become its most direct competitor. The Windsurf situation made that tension visible. OpenAI wanted the IDE. Microsoft wanted the IP. Both companies are covering their exits while keeping the partnership alive because neither can afford to blow it up yet. So what do you do with this information? If you run a cloud platform or infrastructure product, your moat just thinned. OpenAI building a GitHub alternative and a super app is a direct bid for the compute-adjacent developer relationship that AWS, Azure, and GCP have spent a decade building. The developer who used to start from the cloud console now starts from Codex. Start thinking about what you own that OpenAI cannot easily replicate: execution, compliance, data locality, enterprise relationships. Those are the levers. Positioning on raw compute won't hold forever. If you build developer tooling or a security product that sits in the dev workflow, you are being targeted, not personally, but structurally. The integrated platform play always squeezes independent tool vendors. Watch how OpenAI treats third-party integrations with Codex over the next 18 months. If they start replicating capabilities that partners built, that's the tell. If you're evaluating your toolchain strategy right now, do not consolidate onto any single AI platform. The competition between OpenAI and Anthropic is real, and it's running hot. That competition is good for you today. It means aggressive pricing, generous rate limits, and both platforms making concessions to win enterprise deals. Lock in those rates, but architect your workflow so you can move. The team that builds deep platform dependency today will be the team renegotiating from a weak position in 24 months. Here's the 30-year read. Every major technology cycle ends the same way. The enabling layer gets commoditized or consolidated, and the winner is the company that owns the workflow on top of it. Microsoft owned the workflow in the PC era. AWS owned it in the early cloud era. Salesforce owned it in CRM. OpenAI is trying to own the workflow in the AI native development era. Acquiring Astral is one move on that board. The super app is another. The GitHub alternative is a third. Taken together, they form a coherent theory of where the value accretes. The model is not the product. The model is the engine. The product is the complete surface area where a developer does their work. OpenAI figured that out faster than most people expected. The companies that lose in this cycle will be the ones that kept betting on the model being the moat. The companies that win will be the ones that got to the workflow first. Astral was the workflow. Now it's OpenAI's. If you want the full written analysis with the historical numbers and the Microsoft parallel laid out in detail, that's on my Substack. Link in the description. Subscribe if you want the practitioner take, not the press release.